So welcome to Gabriella Kreshuk's senior performance. Yeah. It's very much a happening. It's an ephemeral evening of going into her heart, into her soul, into her intellect. And it's interesting that in a time of transition, which all of our seniors are going through right now, that it's natural to be looking forward. It's natural to be wanting to think what's next. And it's also just part of our American culture, just being so focused on what's forward. But Gabrielle is not like other people, as you know and love her. And she's chosen for her senior project to look at what's been behind her and what's led up to this point, and asking herself, what is home? What does home mean to me? What does this place, this physical place, mean to me? And the heat and the dryness and the fruit and the smell and the sun, and how has that all affected her? How has it affected her being a young woman of color? All of these things are things she's going to be putting into this one-woman show. And it is a one-woman show that has been inspired by many women. And I'm very fortunate. My name is Kimberly Guerrero. I'm very fortunate to be one of those women, a professor in her life. It's my very first year professoring. And it has been my great joy to have a bevy of students here at University of California, Riverside. And what you're about to see is just one of their crowns of glory that are our Highlander graduating class of 2018. And so Gabriella would like for me to just lead us all, just to kind of get on the same page. Breath has been a pivotal part of this entire year as we've been growing as artists. And it's something that even me, hitting the mid-century mark, I've been a professional actor for 30 years, I'm still learning just how to really just let go and breathe. And in our very anxious times, breath is one of the last things, the thing that is most, right, it is our life, literally. And yet it's one of those things that we don't pay attention to. We just kind of just assume it's always going to be there. So let's just take that time and just connect with our bodies, connect with each other, connect with what's about to happen, because it is transcendent. And I believe that there's going to be messages for each and every one of us as we listen to these poems and we let these songs wash over us, that we just prepare ourselves to receive the messages that Gabrielle is about to give us. And she is a little messenger, which Gabrielle means, of course. So what I'd like for you to do is just sit nice and tall up in your chairs where you are. You're going to lean forward just a little bit. Just going to ask your spine to lengthen and widen. And just kind of take your shoulders and just squeeze them up. They may crack. Mine is cracked. As you put them up to your ears and drop. It's like, oh, that's much better, isn't it, right? Already? And we're going to nod your head, yes. And as you do that, let that tension go and shake. And if you have any tension in your face, go ahead and release it. In your jaw, in your eyes, release the tension in your eyes. Try to release the tension in your neck, your shoulders. Kind of wiggle your toes around. So grateful for our feet that do so much work for us and we don't ever think of it very often. Just move your knees around, leave your hips in your seat there. And then we're going to do 3 whispered ahs together just to get that breath. And what I want you focusing on is not the inhale, but actually the exhale. So it's something you can take home with you and use it for the rest of your life. To really breathe properly, your body naturally knows what to do. But usually it's when you breathe, that actually breeds more tension and anxiety. So let's just for a second, let's just breathe out. Now just let your body naturally breathe back in. See kind of how your body's naturally just doing it on its own. This time we're going to breathe in and we're going to whisper out in an ah, and we're going to do a ha like we're fogging up glass. Yes. last one, just release all that tension. And without further ado, we're going to bring Gabriella through to start the one-woman show. And our videographer, Teresa Luna, Miss Teresa Luna, is going to change the battery. And so there may be just a little bit of delay, and then we'll have Gabriella. There will be a talk back afterwards as well.
4:17 at 3 p.m. Blood weather. Depending on where you live, your blood is different. Since I've lived in the desert my whole life, I have been blood. It races through my veins. But if I had been raised in a colder climate, my blood would be as thick as molasses in that same cold. The desert I call home holds in heat, chasing cold away, maybe a week of spring, then a summer that lasts years. Winter, clarified as California cold, proving that the heat that lives in my platelets can't handle true chill. 2:16 at 12:17 in the morning. I walk around with my heart in my pocket, and if I come across someone who needs some of it, I let them hold it, showing them the cracks and the bruises, but most importantly, the scars. My heart has been smashed by too many, including myself. But every tumble, every earth-shattering break and ache, she has mended herself with the calloused fingers of time. All this aching should close me off, shut me off, cage me in. Instead, tears fill the cracks, and she keeps bumping along. So I got the opportunity to go to England a few weeks back and got to see an interview with our beatboxer for the show that we were touring with. And I got a thought for a song, had to write it down, had to record the melody on my phone, and pray that I remembered it. kitchen, windows, bed, nourishment, light, rest. A glorified houseplant shouting my own name in hopes of being fed. These materials equal shelter, but not home. Home needs me, but I need community, with a knit of people enrobing me in yarned warmth and acceptance. Home exists on a plane past our own understanding. Community may be common, but unity can be hard to come by, harder to maintain. Few offer, too far between. Roots rot from too much contact, wither from neglect. Community cannot only be with the self. It needs other voices, thoughts, empathies, and resonances to create a home that wants for nothing. This one is titled, Let Me Walk into the. No flashlight, no phone, no one to guide me through it. Let me walk into the, not to die, but to rest from this light-filled chaos that never sleeps. If I walked into the, there would finally be silence. No responsibility of being anything to anyone. No duty to chirps and vibrations, questions or answers, papers or practice. No one will let me walk into the. They're all selfish. We need you available via email. Remember, we have a meeting this week. There are days I touch the. My vision fissures into two into fissures vision my. Going and leaving. Every time I walk away. So ever since we had a lot of police brutality based around cars and people reaching for things or not doing the right thing, I drive with my wallet in my center console because I don't want to reach for anything. I don't want there to be any confusion if I ever get pulled over by the police. So this was written in response to that. On 4/20 at 1:25 p.m. Key, ignition, running, creating heat. Air starts, warm till it's cool. Scrolling through audio, deciding on voices other than yours to accompany a drive. Long or short. Across the city or around the corner. Sound to create movement. Community with self. A remembering. An alert in the brain. Reach across the console, rummage through a familiar bag. Finding the alarm's off switch. A wallet. An ID. Preventing a possible misunderstanding, preemptive armor in case of emergency, in case of a rolled down window, small black radio, nestled on, blue fabric, over, gold badge, name, number, gun, 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 Bland, Castile, Martin, Brown. Bland, Castile, Martin, Brown. Bland, Castile, Martin, Brown. Bland, Castile, Martin, Brown, Till. 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 Music starts. Steadied hands. Breathing slows. Check mirrors. Stay in lines. Between white dashes, by yellow, in line. In line. Within the box to stay out of a box, grounded breathing to stay above it. Red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Other side of the road. Speeding past. No turn signal. Clear signal. Release held breath. Forgot was held. Turn on AC, combating chill. tearing up my spine. Don't tear up the road. Eat up the miles at pace, measured, slow chews. No destination is worth barreling to if it means red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, white, black, blue, gold, white, black, blue, black, 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 white, flash, red, 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 black. "4:17 at 3:11 p.m. I should live somewhere green. In the desert, I'm surrounded by sparkling life, a persistent deadness that surprises with bold blooming. Being around multitudes of death forces me to create life with my art, more real than the artificial canopies that persist in their overwatered greenery. But the beauty of a field, itself dismantling the very path that leads to it, trees that have every right to be there. There's a passive competition. Who can create more beauty? The surroundings keep winning. This is written on the 10th of February at 4:05 p.m. The sun isn't warming. There wasn't a warning for fog rolling in and blocking the heat. Window stays shut, noise trickles in, nowhere to run from, chaotic din. So I sit and I think about where this spring's led me, all the turns in the trails and the dead ends that follow. Try to chase any trace, any sunbeams that could light a straight path through this patch of haze. I'm getting dizzy. Haven't I been here before? All of that planning, but here once again. I think I'll just lay down, become one with the earth, turning in perfect time with that star I can't reach. So I'm here, and I think about where this spring's led me, all the turns and the trails and the dead ends that follow. Try to chase any trace, any sunbeams that could light a straight path through this patch of haze. Words of comfort echo in disarray, the silence consuming all in its reach. A flickering candle makes an attempt, creating a crawl space in the apathy, where I sit and I think about where this spring's led me. Every time that the trail opened into the sun, try to chase any trace, any memory that could light my way through this patch of haze. Person is a place. When I arrive, your front gate opens. The lights flare up inside, curtains pushed aside, excited for my arrival. Your hinges squeal shut behind me, encircling me in the aura of belonging. I go to ring your bell, but remember the key you gave me. Sliding it in, turning to unlock, finding no click, no resistance. Door already open to me. Turn the knob, a simmering pot of sustenance wafting through the air, reminding me to care for myself through your care for me. "5:22 at 7:05 p.m. Home isn't singular, but a multifaceted gem, turning in my hand, blurring and shining all at once. Some days, my grandmother's eyes peer back, the same shape as her mother's, but bright blue, behind reading glasses as steam from simmering food glides past. Other days, I see the arms of my partner, encircling my small frame in impossible amounts of love and warmth, holding my pieces together, even if for fleeting moments. There, that's the rosemary bush outside another, a squeaky gate, and all there are flickers of willing ears, open hearts, and pure understanding. I appreciate the rare days when I look at this portion of my homelands and see my own eyes shining back. They may be cloudy or shimmering in defeat, squinting from laughter or shut from exhaustion, but they are my own, reminding me that home is not just where you rest your head, but also what it's attached to. "4:16 at 17:09. Teeming with newness. Classics are breathed into. Seeds sprouting with modernity, feasting upon the ancient. The lights, sky, and earth. Changed moment by moment, a gaze inferring new meaning, a sky quickening with rhythm. An old tune, speckled with tried and true skills, born in never-ceasing fires of invention. 4:20 at 1:44 p.m. I deserve to be heard. The only one with my tongue, teeth, skin, nails, hair, mouth, vocal cords, my throat resonates my voice in a way only it can. I give myself the authority, the go-ahead, to go ahead and be present to my worth and present my work. "5:22 at 7:39 p.m. When I was born, the sun shifted from behind gray clouds to return my infantile wails with a warmed greeting. All of my days have been spent with this lifelong companion, through fights with its oppressive grip to please for its return. It has seen me and radiated itself through the landscape of my youth. Scrub and blight, blizzards skittering in fear of trampling, mountains encircling the basin of my baptismal font. Backyard, oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruit blossoms creating a free bouquet, whether you stopped for them or not. A huge small town across 2 cities. Hair frying in the summer, skin begging for moisture in our demure winters. I am this place. But not only this place, soon to be displaced after this leg of the race has been won. A new case to chase, but in my haste forgetting, but remembering. To love the place you leave before it becomes the place you're from. 2:10 at 1 a.m.-ish. I have a friend in Chicago, before I knew I was moving to Chicago, who was having a rough time, and he showed me the snow over FaceTime. And I hadn't seen it fall like that before. And he was having such a rough time, and there's not much you can do, however many thousands of miles away. So I wrote a song. The snow outside covers quietly and thick, blanketing the streets for cozy slumber. Ahead rests awash in lights, a brain questions itself. It sits with its lobes, piecing them together, a gnarled quilt of tangents in an effort to make sense. If the moment never comes, there is no announcement. Gradually the questions change when we stumble past the answer. There is no rush to finding yourself in yourself, revisiting the past in the present. Growing isn't instant. It's okay to not be okay right now. There's time. Snow's still falling. The snow keeps falling, erasing the steps of today. Head buzzing with memory, trying to hold a spark. How people once were, the beginnings of now. Stolen glances through masks, hiding truths from prying eyes. There is no rush to finding yourself in yourself, revisiting the past in the present. Growing isn't instant. It's okay to not be okay right now. There's time. Snow's still falling. It's too early in the morning to plan forever. Too late at night to fix the past. All there is to do is hear the silence the snow grants us, and hope it resets today's worries in time for tomorrow. There is no rush to finding yourself in yourself, revisiting the past in the present. Growing isn't instant. There is no rush to finding yourself in yourself, revisiting the past in the present. Growing isn't instant. It's okay to not be okay right now. There's time. Snow's still falling. Thank you.
process of the culmination of this piece that is a bunch of pieces put together. 14? 14 in total, yeah. And the process of that creation and the work that you put into it, but also your like inspirations and how we got to this point. So first off, I wanted to ask what your inspiration, like your main sources of inspiration for the poems and songs were. Like, how did you start this process?
So I've been a creative writing major my whole time here at UCR, but I didn't really consider myself a writer. I'm not someone who writes every day. I don't sit down with a pen and paper and just like, we're gonna work on sonnets today. It's really inspiration based. So a lot of the poems were written on the 20th of April. That's because a lot of stuff was happening that day, and every time something clicked, I was writing. I think I ended up writing like 7 pieces that day. And so, especially with classes like Kimberly Guerrero's or Louis Carrazzo's, allowing yourself to really be open has been incredibly helpful to my writing.
Awesome. The first poems and songs written in this collection were on February 10th. Were you picturing the full show the entire time, or did that like come to fruition later on in the process and you added older pieces to it?
So I don't write with any thought process. I have an idea. My brain tends to work in poetry or music, and so I just wrote. And it wasn't until I kind of, necessity demands art. I had to do a senior thesis project in order to get my creative writing degree. And I realized I had all of this work, and that it kind of made sense. Like, it was all kind of about home, or mental illness, or like how I've been feeling. And so I brought it to Kim, and we kind of pieced it together with the help of Teresa, and it became a thing. Like, they were written without any thought of ever having them be friends. And we like laid it out all on the ground, and we're like, these two go together. This is an end poem. Okay, we'll space these out. These two are really strong. We're just gonna put them right next to each other. And it just, like in an hour, it was just a thing. And it was kind of terrifying.
I noticed that you timestamp each poem. Whether or not you give it a title, there's always a timestamp. And when I've seen you write, when we're hanging out, you always timestamp your poems. Is there, what about marking the exact moment of a poem or a song resonates with you?
I really like recording things. I think I've been doing that since high school because it lets me kind of know what I've been up to. Like, I don't really keep a journal. It's not something I've ever been particularly good at, except for kind of my day-to-day schedule. And if I can look at May, for example, and say, okay, wow, like 2 p.m. was like a time for us. Like, that was the time we kept writing. Or back in January, it was a lot of like between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. And it was just like, we're just gonna be sad and write poems because we live above a very loud bar and it's awful.
Structurally, going back to like each poem individually, what poets were your inspiration for like your imagery or your the structure of your stanzas, and how did those poets guide your process?
So I'm taking a poetry class this quarter about the history of American poetry up to the 1900s. And like, I've always liked Walt Whitman, but I was never like, I want to write like Walt. I started learning more about him, and I realized I kind of do. So I started reading more and kind of picking up on the naturalist imagery. Same goes for Emerson. Emily Dickinson has been a really big inspiration because she just doesn't care. She's like, I'm going to put a period here. There's going to be a dash here. And I'm just going to live my life and no one can stop me. And then for more current poets, Dinesh Smith does a lot of writing on the African American community and police brutality. And has a really strong stage presence. And a poet I learned about last quarter, Chulon Choi, does a really good job of telling a whole story without really giving context, which is something that I find really interesting to play around with in my own work.
I know from reading your poems in the past that a lot of your work has like a very visual structure. Do you think that you write for poems to be read or poems to be heard or both, and how can you incorporate those moving forward?
So I started out as a fiction major and hated every second of it. Being forced to fill up page after page and make a whole world and then make people talk and then have it so that people understand how they're moving in space was like, I hate this. And so I realized that like my brain essentially just creates poetry. Like when I have really intense emotions, I just write poetry. And so from that, I realized from fiction that I'm not afraid of using the whole page. I really like seeing how a poem spreads out all across it because you get a whole page. You might as well use it. And so I think it's a bit of both. I think I really like being read, and I really like how they look on the page, and so like for the silent poem, which is kind of what I've titled it. It's all over the page. Like it takes up the whole real estate, and what I try to do with that is use those silences. So really force people, whether they're reading to it or listening to it, to hear what's happening in that space and kind of be present to a lack of sound.
Cool. How about with the songs? Who inspired your sound? Who inspired like your choice of instrumentation? What kind of led you to writing the music that you do?
So when I was in middle school, I stumbled across Sarah Bareilles and Ingrid Michaelson. They're both singer-songwriters. It's either piano or guitar, both, and it's just kind of them. And they're going for it, and they're telling their story, and that kind of, the way their voices resonate really inspired me early on. So like I have a lot of old songs from when I was like 13 to 15 that all kind of sound like, oh, this person listens to a lot of their music. But now it kind of depends. So sometimes it's because you and I are sitting listening to a musical theater piece, and I'm like, I have like a line crosses across my head, and I'm like, that sounds really cool. And then maybe the melody will follow. Or I'll write the whole song and then have to read it over and over again to find a melody. Or have to realize that it's not a song at all, which is always really fun when you spent 2 hours trying to lay out a whole chord map and nothing has worked. But it just kind of is everything. Like, that's why I've been forcing myself to listen to more music this year. Because I realize if I'm listening to music, I'm writing music.
Cool. In both your songs and your poems, especially in the show, we touched on it a little bit earlier, what themes and motifs do you feel this particular show centers on, and why do you feel they're very important to you, and how do you feel they can be important to the world as a whole?
I think, so there's this concept in creative writing where you write for the reader. I've always chafed against that because the reader doesn't know what the reader wants until you present them with something. Otherwise, like, everything would be a John Grisham novel. Like, no drags of John Grisham. Like, you're doing great. But people don't know what they want until they have the opportunity to see it. And, can you repeat the question?
I was wondering what themes and motifs that the show centers on, and how they drive the show,
Yeah.
but also how do you feel like they're important to you and to the world as a whole?
So I tend to use a lot of very specific imagery. I also like taking a feeling and trying to extrapolate it. So instead of saying like, oh, I'm sad today, saying I'm a leaky boat in the middle of a lake. Because I feel like that expands far deeper than just that surface word. So I try to take concepts and extrapolate them based on how I see the world. I write a lot about nature. I feel like it's a really good allegory for home, especially like when you look outside. There's a weird contrast between the scrub on a mountain and grass, like green grass. And so I kind of bring those together. And I think what I enjoy about art is that it isn't really about the reader totally. So if someone has never been in a desert before, that's an opportunity to hear what it's like to live in a desert. If someone does, it's a validation of an experience. So that's kind of how I structure it that way.
Okay, awesome. I know, because we've talked about it, that this is, and you've titled it A Collection in Progress, that this is just one iteration of a show that you plan on continuing in growth and like pursuing in the future. Where do you picture this show going?
I picture it being longer. I picture it having more songs. I want to try to incorporate kind of that 13th piece with the final song and kind of have a transition more, which will just naturally happen after we move. I also don't, it's not firmly a one-woman show. I see a lot of dance incorporated into it. I see a lot of interesting back and forth with spoken word. I'm working on a new style that incorporates two people and a limited word bank. And seeing how to incorporate two voices into this piece, I think would be really interesting.
All right. So what guided we talked, this is a senior thesis that you put together. Why perform it now?
I feel like it was time. I hadn't performed on a stage in a while, and I hadn't done it on my own terms in a while. And so the ability to work with a team of badass women and kind of bring this all together, and also I feel like this is the only headspace in this current iteration for it. It's very how I'm feeling right now. It's about transition, it's about movement, it's about appreciating where you're from, it's about looking to the people who brought you here, and also how that incorporates into your future instead of kind of falls behind as something you're moving away from. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just kind of where I am right now. And it's like Kim says, sometimes you walk into a room and you think you know what you'll do. But when you step, you connect to the ground, and you just take the moment to listen to yourself and your surroundings, what's supposed to happen will happen. And that's kind of how this piece feels. It's a culmination of my experiences with your family, of my life with my boyfriend, of my grandparents, of my professors, of being here on this campus, of being raised in the desert, of being a woman of color, of being a depressed and anxious woman of color. And I feel like if I had performed this earlier, it wouldn't have resonated with me as much. And I'd like to perform this later, but in this version, it was the only time and space, the only people I feel like could have resonated with all of it.
Okay. How do you hope that this show will help guide your future with it?
I feel like it's a jumping off point for a structure. So taking a certain number of poems, either writing them for the collection or writing them separately and seeing what sticks together, working on new music, bringing that together. I feel like it gives me a good springboard. So moving to Chicago, I could just move. I could have nothing planned, I could have no job prospects, but I feel like this gives me something. This gives me something to show to an agent. This gives me something that if I want to rent out a storefront theater for $200, this is something that I can perform. It's something that can kind of ground me and give me something to work on instead of going there and being like, I'm going to be a poet, but not have anything. It also is really comforting. I wrote 25 minutes of material, and that's bizarre to me. And so it's also kind of like an achievement. It's, wow, you can do this. That means you can do this again.
Okay. And finally, before I turn it out to y'all to ask questions, what did you learn about yourself, about your work from putting this together?
I learned that I really love this place. I really love living in the desert. I love lizards. I didn't realize how much I love lizards and how much I'll miss them. I learned that my brain has an overarching plan that it will not tell me because I wrote all of these completely disconnected from each other, and they work. And so it's giving me a lesson in learning to trust myself, learning to learn from myself, and listening to myself, and also, finding your people and finding your listeners and your readers, because I've brought some of these to other people and it was not understood at all, or it was bashed, or people didn't get it, or people tried to edit it down a path that it clearly wasn't going down. And so by having people like you, like Kim, like Renee Mosher Pierce, reading my work and finding a resonance, when you find your readers, it's so nice. Like Teresa even, like we were reading through everything, and the first time she heard the Snow Song, she cried. And I think that's why I do it, because I know how it feels to be in this. But I feel like if someone else can find how they feel in themselves through the work that I'm doing, then I've done it. I think I came up with a sentence: if I can help other people find their them, then I've done it.
Okay, does anybody out here have any questions? Bella, anything? Yes.
I noticed that there was a few motifs of anxiety and finding peace and trying to find home and family that repeated in your work. And I wonder sometimes, is the writing process a process that helped bring you from that anxiety to the peace that you're searching for?
So, with the anxiety, with the searching that's present in the piece as a whole, I find that my writing is half like self-therapy and half processing. So, I've gotten a lot better at recognizing how I'm feeling and finding a pen and paper and just getting it out. Because sometimes that's half the battle. But also, with the anxiety present, I also just think it's important to record it. I'm an anxious being, and I might not always be an anxious being. And if I don't record who I am at 23, living here, with the people that I surrounded myself, then I won't know what it was like when I look back. So it's half recording it, half working through it, and half just getting it out.
I like that there's a historical piece to it, like an archive that you're creating of your life. That's really kind of a cool component.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Have you considered, because obviously I was privy to the songs as you were developing them, and I was humming along hoping that the camera's not picking up my horrible singing. You guys know I can't sing. But I knew the songs, and some of the songs I've only heard once. And I think that's a rare gift, to not only have these powerful lines that really move your soul and make you think. Same here, I cried when the first time I heard the Snow Song as well. And it's so profound. And I think one of the first things I told Gabby was people need to hear this. It takes time to find yourself in yourself. And how it comes out of a 23-year-old blows my ever-loving mind. But yet it is. Wisdom's wisdom, no matter who it's coming from, right? And I just thought, the world needs to hear this, and they need to hear it now, particularly now, in this high time of high stress and high anxiety all around the world. And so I'm wondering, and I'm so happy this is happening. And of course, me in my commercial sense, I think there's a positive side of commercialism, because commercialism means you're sharing with a large audience, and there's a positive side of that. So I'm just wondering, do you have any kind of feelings, and pro or against, about putting out just your music, just as on iTunes or something, or Spotify or whatever, in a way that people can have access to these lyrics and these songs just on their own, on a sampling?
Yeah, that is definitely a part of it as well. I want to write a couple more songs. I've written one song, the first duet I've ever written for both of us, about what it's like to live here and to leave it, but recognizing that you can't stay. I think I have it, and it's it doesn't really count if you're sinking or swimming if it's in the puddles of your youth. It just doesn't count. It doesn't count if you just stay where you've always stayed. It doesn't count if you stay where you've always stayed, because you were there. And so, there's a version of this where I take these songs, and I think a couple more to kind of be more comprehensive with how I'm feeling right now. and releasing it as an EP. Teresa and I have talked about it, getting more instrumentation in it, getting more harmonies in it, and making it more of an experience. So, like, this piece isn't just this piece for me. This piece is eventually like a chapbook. This piece is eventually an EP. This piece is eventually a full show with like 2 or 3 actors and dancing and music. Like, this show is very much like, look at this thing I made. Look at the seed I made. Now we're gonna throw it in some fertilizer and just like help it. Anyone else?
I've been privileged to be the grandmother of my wonderful granddaughter since
Day 1.
May 25th, 1995. I witnessed her birth, and she came out entertained. Dr. Kawasaki did not have to help her little hiney. She came out screaming, and her birth is all a part of her name. She came out with a loud wail. Her mother's friend from Hawaii, that was Gabrielle Blow Your Horn, so that's where Gabriella came from. Her godaunt Becky from Hawaii, she was a perfect crown. As a matter of fact, the doctor had gone across the street and the nurses begged her mom, please don't let her come out before Dr. Kawasaki comes back. It was a natural, no epidural or anything, just a natural birth. She came out screaming, a perfect crown, so that's where Kale Alihi came from, crown of glory. In Mission Viejo, it was an overcast day, and the minute my little angel came out, the sun shined. So that's where Soleil came from. So this is my wonderful, blessed Gabriela Kale Alihi Soleil Krashik.
I think that wraps it up.
What after that?